Yes. Students, yeah, let us see what is detailed designing. Sorry, detailed scheduling. See, when it comes to scheduling, there are two types, that is overall scheduling and detailed scheduling. Overall schedule will give you the abstract about the schedule overall scheduling process, whereas the detailed scheduling will give you the small details about uh, the individual tasks. So what is the task, to whom it is assigned, what is the duration, and so on. Such small details will be fetched by using detailed scheduling. Detailed schedule is not done completely in the start, and it evolves as the project as the project work starts, and as the hello, yeah, as the project progress starts as the project work starts progressing, the detailed schedule will get evolved. That means it's not a static thing. From time to time it gets evolved, and it can use Microsoft project for keeping it. So Microsoft projects, that's a tool which you can use for scheduling the Microsoft, sorry, for scheduling any given project. So that's a Microsoft project. It's an ideal tool which is ideally suited for scheduling tasks. Detailed schedule is the most live document for managing the project. So detailed schedule is the most live document for managing the project. The very reason is that it gives in detail about the various small individual tasks. So what is the task and who is the authorized person? What is the progress? How much is done? All such things can be tracked easily. So therefore, it's the one thing which is very much essential for tracking process. Any activity to be done must get reflected in the detailed design. See, within the given project, you cannot say that some individual is doing some task which is not documented in detailed schedule. Let it be any task such as configuring the system or updating the softwares. Even such small things will be part of detailed scheduling. You cannot have any task which is not documented in detailed design. So that's why it got its name detailed scheduling. Detailed scheduling. Now let us see an example for detailed schedule. See here we have the name of the module, that is the history. Then this is the act code. Okay, so this is the action code, and this is the name of the task. For the task, see there will be so many hundreds of tasks. So how to identify them? To identify them, we give some unique identification number. So that is nothing but the unit test number 17, and the duration for that is 1 day, and the hours allotted is 7 hours. Okay, even though one working day means 8 hours, so it is planned in such a way that just 7 hours are good enough for this particular task. To do the unit testing of this particular task, 7 hours are allotted. And look at here, this is the start date and end date, both are same. Seventh month, 18th, same date will start and it will end up. Okay, so far how much is the percentage of work completed? That is 0% is completed. And dependencies, there are no dependencies. That means absolutely no dependencies, therefore it is nil. Okay, and resource, so this is some coding, so they'll be giving some code words, so they have given something like SP. Okay, that is the resource. So SB is nothing but name of a some developer who will do the unit testing. You know that all the unit testing tasks will be taken by the developers. The person who writes the code has to test that piece of code. That is called unit testing. Okay, this is one example for detailed schedule. See, in the previous class we saw the example for overall schedule. Now we are seeing the example of detailed schedule. So this, say when you get a question like explain scheduling. So as part of that, you will be rating like what is the meaning of scheduling, and under that there are two types: overall schedule and detailed schedule. And after explaining what is overall schedule, you will write one example for that. Then uh, explain what is detailed schedule, and you have to write some example like this. So without this example, your explanation is incomplete. Students, remember, without writing the example for the scheduling, let it be overall schedule or detailed schedule. Without the example, your answer is incomplete. This is a module, action code, task, duration, and effort. So effort is always calculated in terms of hours. And here you can see start date, end date, percentage completed. That means percentage work completed. And if there are any dependencies, so then those dependencies will be written here. Okay, say for example, dependency module 2 or some name of the module that has to be written here. So and resource means the person who is supposed to carry out this task. That is the resource. Then detailed schedule. Each task has a name, date, duration, resource, etc. So here we know each task has so many things: name of the module, action code, task, duration, effort. Apart from that, very importantly, start date, end date, and so on. Percentage done is for tracking purpose. So there are so many project management tools, they will use it. Ultimately, the delivery manager will keep a track on it. So what is the percentage of work completed? So very frequently has to update that progress to the client. The detailed schedule has to be consistent with milestones. That means tasks are sub activities of milestone level activities. So effort should add up. Total schedule should be preserved. That means when you achieve, say when you accomplish some sub activity, you will be achieving some milestone. So effort should add up. That means if you keep putting that same kind of effort, so you will achieve more milestones. Total schedule should not be preserved. Sorry, total schedule should be preserved. So you see, students, therefore, there will be almost okay, no major changes. See, once you prepare the overall schedule, there will be no much changes inside that. But it is not the same case with detailed schedule. The detail as the progress, as the project gets progressing, the detailed schedule will keep evolving. Okay, that's the one difference between overall schedule and detailed schedule that you need to understand. Now we'll move to the new topic, that is quality planning. So as I told, within the industry, there will be a separate team called as a QA team. We call them as quality assurance team. They are responsible for preparing the quality plan. Now let us see what is quality planning. So the basic agenda of this quality planning is to deliver a very high quality software, which will also meet all the client requirements. So when I say quality software, the essential attribute is that, so see, there is no software which will come without errors. So there will be bugs. When I say software, obviously there will be bugs, but you have to minimize the number of bugs. So when you minimize, the number of bugs by implementing a lot of quality checks, then we can develop a quality software. Quality can be defined in many ways. So depending upon the nature of the project, we define quality using different attributes. Say for example, for some of the applications, say by using reliability and security, we can measure the quality. Okay. So for some other project, it may be flexibility. That could be the very important factor used to measure the quality of the software. So like that, depend upon the nature of the project, we use different parameters to measure the quality aspect of the software project. Current industry standard delivered defect density. Delivered defect density. That means, so number of defects divided by 1000 lines of code. See, already I have told you. Say, even if we consider an example of an experienced developer, when he writes 100 lines of source code, he without his knowledge, he will be injecting at least 10 bugs. On an average, you will be injecting 10 bugs into the system. So therefore, let us assume within 2 days, suppose if he writes 1000 lines of codes, so 10 into 10, 100 bugs will be there. So that is a normal case. Now, if we consider a normal software engineer who is not much experienced, then obviously he may inject few more bugs. Okay, the current industry standard to measure the quality planning is number of defects by thousands of lines of code. Okay, now as per my example, if I say for example, for 100 lines, if it is 10 bugs, which is acceptable, then for 1000 lines of source code, 100 bugs are acceptable. But what is important here, the severity of the bug should be very less. Okay, that is what very important. Defect means it is something that causes software to behave in an inconsistent manner. That is called a defect. Okay, so defect means you should not assume that every time when you compile the program it should throw the error. No, that is also defect only, but need not be the same thing. So defect is something that causes software to behave in an inconsistent manner. Then aim of a project is to deliver software with low delivered defect density. When I say this is a software with low delivered defect density, that means it contains minimum number of defects. So hence that is acceptable, and that has to pass through a lot of quality checks. Now we'll see what is defect injection and removal. And we know that software development is a laborious task, and defects are injected at any stage of the project. In the coming slide, there is a diagram that I'll show you. So how defects will be injected at various stages of the software project. As a quality goal, it is low delivered. A quality goal is to low delivered defect density. These defects have to be removed. Okay, so the software should have low delivered defect density. That means whatever the software that you have delivered that is having low density of defects, then it is done primarily by quality control, that is QC activities of reviews and testing. Okay, then you may be thinking what they do as part of quality control. As part of quality control, they do reviews and testing. So while doing the reviews and testing, they'll be having certain metrics. They'll check the software against those metrics to assess what is the current quality of the software, what is the defect density. They will see, okay, so in this particular piece of code, okay, these are the defects. Okay, so depending upon the severity of the bug, they'll take a call. Even while resolving defects which are having very high severity. Now look at this diagram. This diagram shows the defect injection and removal. That is defect injection. That is nothing but defect injection. So what is the meaning of defect injection? Okay, one very good example is, say, documenting the requirement which is not at all clear. That means, so you have documented the requirement, but it is quite confusing. That is also considered as a defect. Okay, because what happens when the designer doesn't understand it properly, obviously he will fail to design it properly. Then same thing happens with the developer. If the requirement is confusing, then he will be in a dilemma actually what is to be implemented. Okay, such things are to be removed. Okay, so therefore, so you can see here, this is R. This R stands for defect removal. Okay, that means once you prepare the requirements report, so you review it, then remove the defects. That means So now in this in our example, say for example, particular requirement is documented in a confusing manner. You rewrite that requirement such that it is very clear and complete. Then in the design phase also, there are chances of defect injection. That means when you do mistakes, say for example, while preparing the activity diagram, you will do one mistake, or while preparing the sequence diagram, you will do some mistake. See, sequence diagram will give you the in detail. See, that is a detailed design diagram, isn't it? So obviously, so that error will also propagate to the next level, that is into source code. So when you prepare the design wrongly, as per your design only, the developer will also develop the software. Therefore, so you can see that error there also. Okay, so therefore, once you come up with a design document, that is to be reviewed, and the bugs have to be removed. That is defect removal. Then in coding also, always there are chances of injecting the bugs. So as I told, when an experienced developer writes 100 lines of source code, always there are chances of injecting 10 bugs on an average. So how to overcome those things? The code has to be reviewed and it should be refactored. So there is a process called as code refactoring. As part of code refactoring, such things can be minimized, and also there are dynamic code review tools. Those things can be used, and also in case of agile projects, what happens? So there will be two people working together. So if one is writing the code, another will be reviewing. So those are some of the measures that can be taken for removal of the bugs during coding. So then, so continued by coding is unit testing. Once again, this unit testing will be performed by students. You tell me who will perform unit testing? Hello?
Developer, sir.
Yeah, developer. The person who writes the code should also test the particular piece of code. So that is unit testing. Okay. See here, during unit testing, so during coding, there is a chance where a developer can inject the bugs, but during unit testing, there is no chance wherein the developer will be injecting the bugs, because there he'll be testing it. What he's doing is just testing. He's not tweaking the code. Okay, once he finds bugs during this phase, okay, he will try to fix it. If he finds the bugs, he will try to fix it. That is defect removal. Then after that, it will be sent to a professional testing team. Okay, that is where they do black box testing. So that is IT. Okay, integration testing. IT means integration testing. ST means system testing. IT/ST means integration testing and system testing. So that will be done by the professional testing team. And at the end, AT means acceptance testing. Students, you need to understand the terminologies. AT means acceptance testing. Okay, see, when you write the diagram, students, keep in your mind, after writing it as AT, okay, in the bottom somewhere you have to write the expansion of AT colon acceptance testing, IT colon integration testing, ST colon system testing. That you have to write. UT means unit testing. So all those things you have to write. R means removal, removal of bugs. Students, anything you want to ask with respect to this diagram? Shall I continue? Hello? Yes. Yes. Now let us see what are the approaches to develop what are the approaches to quality management? Okay, how to assure quality software. So as part of that, there are some management activities. We call them as quality management. So one such approach is ad hoc. Ad hoc means some testing, some reviews done as and when needed. So during different phases of the software development life cycle, some testing will be done. See, testing means not like always. So you are testing the source code, not necessarily. So even if you are cross-checking your design, that is also testing. Even if you are reviewing your requirements document, that is also testing only. And some reviews. See, reviews will be done usually for the source code. Okay, even for the design diagrams also reviews will be done. So during the reviews, say for example, I am doing the review of the source code. So how to do that? So first I'll keep the requirements document. I'll understand what is the requirement, and I'll check the program whether the same requirements are implemented or not. Okay, so such things can be done as and when, that is called as ad hoc approach. And second approach is procedural approach. So procedural approach is nothing but you'll be having a defined procedures for each and every work. Say for example, if you want to do unit testing, so what is the procedure? Okay, there is a standard way of doing unit testing, so that you have to follow. Similarly, if you consider the example of testing team, how to do user acceptance testing. So to do user acceptance testing, the client representative or the client will be giving you the test cases and the test data. You have to pass that test data which is given by the client representative. Then you have to test the application. So that is the procedure. So such an uh, process is called as procedural approach. Next is quantitative approach. So the third approach is quantitative. In case of quantitative approach, defect data analysis done to manage the quality process. So say first we consider, say for example, 10,000 lines of source code, that is the size of the software. Then say for example, 500 defects. Okay, so then you do the data analytics for that. You do the data analysis. So if 10 bugs are acceptable for 100 lines, then 100 can be acceptable for 1000. For 10,000, so 100 into 10, that is 1000. So therefore 100 up to 1000 bugs are okay. So but what is the outcome? 500 bugs or 500 defects. So therefore, okay, that is okay. Okay, the number is okay, but among those 500 bugs, just we need to make sure none of the bug is having more severity. See, when we define a bug, we'll assign a severity. For example, very less, moderate, high, very high. See, this is the severity of the bug. So when I say certain number of bugs are acceptable, the severity of such bugs should be less or very less. Then only such bugs are acceptable. Otherwise, they have to be fixed. Let us see procedural approach. A quality plan defines what quality control tasks will be undertaken and when. Okay, that means they are telling that there will be a quality plan which will define what are the tasks that are to be carried out as part of quality control, and what is the name of the task and when it has to be carried out. That means on what particular phase of the software development process that work has to be carried out. Main quality control tasks are reviews and testing. Okay, the major quality control tasks are reviewing the deliverables and testing. So what are deliverables? Say after requirement analysis, there is an outcome, that is the requirements document, that is that is one deliverable. After that we start design phase. So design document is one deliverable. After that coding, the outcome is source code. So that is one deliverable. After that testing, the what is the deliverable? Test report. Okay, so these things have to be reviewed and tested. Then procedural approach also gives you guidelines and procedures for reviews and testing are provided. So without guidelines and standard procedures, you cannot carry out any particular task. If you do that, it will result in more number of bugs. Okay, if you do not follow standard guidelines and procedures, so such an approach will result in more number of bugs. During project execution, adherence to the plan and procedures are ensured. Okay, so during the project execution, you should adhere to the, being a member of the team, you should be adhere to the plan. Okay, you should know what is the plan. So when we have to start the work, when it has to be completed, and what are the procedures to carry out the particular activity. So the team members have to be adhered to that. Next is quantitative approach. Quantitative means dealing with the numbers. So how many lines of source code, how many number of bugs, how many modules, and such things. It goes beyond asking, has the procedure been executed? Analyzes defect data to make judgments about quality. That means, so you first analyze the test data. So for these many lines of source code, so these many are the bugs. Then you categorize them based upon the severity of the bugs. Okay, do among these bugs, are there any bugs with high severity, very high severity, or moderate severity? Okay, those things have to be fixed at the earliest. Okay, so the bugs with less severity or no severity, sorry, with very less severity, that is okay, that can be acceptable. Then key parameters are defect injection and removal rates, defect removal efficiency. So defect injection and removal rates will define what is the removal efficiency. Say for example, 10 bugs are detected. Among 10 bugs, 5 bugs are having moderate severity, and remaining 2 bugs are having very high severity, and 3 are having very less severity. So therefore, now 5 are moderate, 2 are very high severity, and 7 are very less severity. So this you can fix. You have to fix 7 bugs which are having very high severity and moderate severity. Then your defect removal efficiency is good. Why it is good? Because for remaining 3 bugs, the severity is very less. That's why. Quality plan. The quality plan drives the quality activities in the project. That means the quality plan will chart out so the list of quality checks that has to be carried out. Okay, and in the sequence, and it will also tell at what stage of the project they have to be carried out, and also they will tell you what is the procedure. Okay, that's why the quality plan drives the quality activities in the project. The level of plan depends on models available. The level of the plan depends on the models available. Then must define quality control tasks that have to be performed in the project. So the quality plan must define very clearly what are the quality control tasks that have to be performed. As I told, the very important activities under QCR, reviews and testing. Okay, then quality plan can specify defect levels for each quality control tasks. Okay, so it can specify defect levels for each quality control tasks if models and data are available. This is risk management. So irrespective of the type of the project, always risk management is mandatory. So let it be software project or any other project. Okay, so the risk management is always applicable for every domain. Okay, not only for the software projects. So now we'll see how to manage risk for software projects. See, any project can fail. Reasons can be technical, managerial, and etc. Isn't it? Always see when you as a company when you take up any project, okay, always there are so many reasons why it may fail. Okay, because so some reasons may be technical, managerial, and sometimes it may be financial. Okay, and lack of resources and so on. Okay, project management aims to tackle the project management aspect. Okay, so this second point is very important. The project management aims to tackle the project management aspect. Engineering life cycles aim to tackle the engineering issues. A project may fail due to unforeseen events. Risk management aims to tackle this. Okay, a project may fail due to unforeseen events. That means we don't know. Okay, so in the future, what kind of problems may arise at various stages of the project. So, risk management aims to tackle these issues. Let us see what is the meaning of risk. Any condition or event whose occurrence is not certain but which can cause the project to fail. That is called as a risk. Okay. See, let it be any reason. If that reason, okay, may lead to the failure of the project, we call that as a risk. Okay, I'll give an example for that. Say right now there is lot of demand for software engineers in the industry. There is huge demand, so that is the reason why from past 6 months, Accenture has given 3 times increments and Wipro has given 2 times increments. So usually, so they'll give once in a year, isn't it? Okay, now you have to think why they have gained thrice increments within 6 months and why Wipro has given twice increments within 6 months. Because there is a huge demand for engineers. Okay, so lack of availability of engineers may be one of the reason why your project may fail, isn't it? Because when I say project, it is time bound, isn't it? See, if you as per the MOU, if you do not deliver the software within a stipulated time, okay, so then you will not get the complete amount. Okay, then another reason, say for example, the choice of development with respect to selecting the tools and technologies. If you do not make a right choice, even that may lead to project failure. Then if you do not review the design document, okay, thoroughly, so that may lead to wrong implementation. Okay, and that may lead to project failure. Okay, and very importantly, if you do not test the application thoroughly, so that may lead to project failure. Because there are always chances that developers may be doing some mistakes, and those things have to be exposed by the testers, isn't it? That is the task of the tester. If that testing procedure itself is not thorough, then obviously, okay, the projects may fail. The risk management has two basic aspects. So one is risk assessment and another one is risk control. Okay, now let us see what is risk assessment and risk control. Risk assessment means to identify possible risks to a project, that is, to those events that might occur and which might cause the project to fail. Okay, try to forecast the events which may cause a project to fail. So as I told, so selecting the right set of tools and technologies, so that can be one thing, and thoroughly reviewing the all the deliverables. Okay, so cross check whether all the requirements given by the client are documented as part of requirements document. Then check the consistency between design document and the requirements document. If both are consistent, okay, then only you move on to coding. Okay, then once the coding is done, okay, ask your developers to do thorough unit testing. Then once again do the review. Okay, review that whatever the functionalities that are implemented are in line with the requirements document or not, or in line with design and requirements document or not. So that is called as a consistency check. Okay, those are all the risks you have to forecast. No algorithm possible done by what ifs checklist past experience. Okay, you see, even if you have, see, there is no algorithm which will rectify your risk or which will overcome your risk. There is no such algorithm. Okay, and just by having past experience, you cannot simply say that yes, I can forecast all the risks and I have a mitigation plan. See, mitigation plan means Say for example, for if something happens, what action is to be taken. So that is called as the mitigation plan. So, and can have a list of top 10 risks that projects have seen in the past. That is very important. Okay, always it is better to have a list of top 10 risks that projects have seen in the past. Say for example, you are developing one software for healthcare sector. Okay, so you take the past data of the healthcare projects. So what kind of risks had come? Okay, you make a list. Okay, then you be prepared for how to handle such risks in case if such risks are also coming in your project. Okay, that is risk assessment. Then top risk examples: shortage of technically trained manpower. See, having the engineers is different, and having the trained engineers, that is different. So always we should have a trained engineers. Then too many requirement changes. See, especially in agile, even in the it is very common that even in the middle of the project, the client will come and he will tell, please do incorporate this change. Please, this is the only change. Please incorporate. Okay, so if there are too many requirement changes, so that is also a risk. We should avoid such things. Then unclear requirements. Always we need to make sure that the requirements are very clear, not at all confusing, and they are complete. Then not meeting performance requirements. The performance requirements means, see, for every team member will be giving, the company will be giving the setting the benchmark when they develop any, say, let it be design document, let it be source code, or let it be the task is software testing, they have to meet the benchmark. Okay, every company will be having their own standards, okay, to measure the performance. So that should be met. Okay, performance requirements have to be met by each and every individual which is within the teams. Then unrealistic schedules. See, always the schedules are prepared based upon the experience of previous projects, and that will be done by, okay, experts. Okay, that will be done by senior technicians. Okay, so always make sure that the schedules are realistic. They are not unrealistic. Okay, unrealistic schedules are example for a risk. Then insufficient business knowledge. Okay, if you do not have end-to-end knowledge, okay, so that is also the risk. You make sure that every team member within the team are having the required domain knowledge so that they can work efficiently for that project. Then another risk is working on new technology. Say for example, you have a team which was working on say for example cloud computing. Now you are asking that team to work on blockchain technology, so therefore definitely it is a risk. Okay, so for that, to overcome this risk, you make sure that you have given enough time for them to understand so what is blockchain technology, and you have provided them lot of training. Okay, and they have worked on some, yeah, exercises so that they can better understand and implement the requirements. Okay, such measures have to be taken to overcome this new technology risk. Next is risk prioritization. See, the meaning of risk prioritization is that, say, when you encounter certain risks within the project, so which is to be resolved first, you have to assign the priority. That process is called risk prioritization. The number of risks might be large, and you must prioritize them to focus attention on the high risk areas. So just like how I said, when you get a bug, first you have to fix the severity, whether it is very less, moderate, high, or very high. Based upon that, we give priority to resolve the bugs. Similarly, in the same fashion, we have to deal with the risks. For prioritization, impact of each risk must be understood. Okay, so especially the risks that lead to financial loss and the risks that lead to system crash have to be assigned very high priority. In addition, probability of the risk occurring should also be understood. Okay, in addition, the probability of risk occurring should also be understood. That means you should have an idea at what stage what kind of risk may arise. Okay, and that probability should be known. Risk exposure RE. So, okay, how to calculate the risk exposure? There is a formula. So, risk exposure RE is equal to probability of risk occurring. Students, 1 minute. Students, I am back. So how to calculate risk exposure is, so the formula to calculate risk exposure is probability of risks occurring into risk impact. So using this formula, they can calculate risk exposure. Risk exposure is the expected value of loss for a risk. Say for example, if this risk okay, if this is the risk, so this is the amount of loss. Okay, so to calculate that, we have this formula. So therefore, risk exposure is the expected value of loss for a particular risk. Prioritization can be done based on risk exposure value. See, if the risk exposure value is very high, then the priority should be high. If the risk exposure value is very less, okay, then you can resolve that risk later at later point of time. So by using that risk exposure as the factor, you have to assign the priority for various risks, and plans can be made to handle high risk exposure risks. That means you should have a prior plan about how to deal with the risks that are having very high risk exposure. Say, for example, so you have written some program. Okay, so if you and that program is not thoroughly tested. Okay, if you work with such programs, there are chances where the system may crash. Isn't it? So, what is the mitigation plan to overcome that risk? Okay, that is to be planned. Okay, now what is the simple approach to risk prioritization? The very simple approach is classify risk occurrence probabilities as low, medium, and high. Low, medium, and high. Classify risk impact as low, medium, high. Okay, so for risk occurrence also, you are having low, medium, high, and for risk impact also low, medium, and high. Then identify those that are HH or HM and or MH. Okay, see here, HH means, see, first thing is risk probability is very high. That is first H, and second H is risk impact. So risk probability is also very high. Risk impact is also very high. That is called HH or HM. HM means first risk probability is high and risk impact is medium. That is HM. Okay, MH means risk occurrence probability is medium, risk impact is high, that is MH. Okay, like that you can assign the code for them. Like that you can identify the risk. So to identify the risk, therefore we are using two factors. One is risk occurrence probability and another one is risk impact. Okay, so here say for example, MH means risk occurrence probability is medium and risk impact is high. Since the impact is high, this has to be given very high priority. See here we have three things: HH, HM, and MH. So for HH and MH, we have to give high priority compared to HM because here the impact is high in case of HH and MH. Focus on these for risk mitigation. Okay, then we'll work for most small and medium sized projects. Okay, and these Okay, these procedures will work for small and medium sized projects. Okay, so then what, and if you think what about large projects. Okay, large projects means so critical projects. So most of the times you have to rely on mathematical modeling, okay, to avoid such risks. But if you rely on mathematical models, you can avoid lot of risks. Okay, that is the solution part. Okay, then risk control. Can the risk be avoided? Okay, example, if new hardware is a risk, it can be avoided by working with the proven hardware. Okay, say for example, so you are working on a project and you know that the hardware components will keep evolving once in 6 months. Okay, now instead of using some new hardware which you don't know, okay, how it is going to behave when you install your program, so instead of taking that risk, so better you use the proven hardware which is working fine with that software. Okay, that is the one idea using which you can avoid the risk. Okay, for others, risk mitigation steps need to be planned and executed. Okay, for other kind of risks, risk mitigation steps need to be planned and executed. So what is the meaning of risk mitigation? Just few minutes back I told the meaning of risk mitigation is, say for example, if this particular risk occurs, so this is the plan, this is the procedure to tackle that risk, that is called risk mitigation. Actions taken in the project such that if the risk materializes, its impact is minimal. So you should take action such that you are minimizing the impact of the risk. Okay, that is called risk mitigation. Then it involves extra cost. Yes, it involves extra cost because you have to deploy people to mitigate that risk, isn't it? So to counter attack that risk, you have to deploy people and they will be working. So and slightly that may vary your schedule. Okay, that's why I told detailed schedule will keep evolving as as your project also progresses, and obviously it involves extra cost. Risk mitigation examples: too many requirement changes. That is okay. How to minimize this particular risk? See, in the beginning we told while telling the examples of risk, too many requirement changes. Now, how to tackle that? Okay, convince the client that changes in requirements will have an impact on the schedule. That means you say, see, now if you bring requirements in the middle of the project, it will take more time to implement. Obviously, it will affect our budget. So this is a risk. Kindly don't come with such requirements. You clearly tell them. Then define a procedure for requirement changes. Okay, you tell them what is the procedure. See, during the requirement phase. Okay, so before we finishing that preparing the requirements document, if there are any new requirements are to be added, you can add. Otherwise, after we delivering that requirements document to you, at least at that time you suggest the changes. After that, you don't come up with major changes. Okay, minor changes are okay, but don't come up with major changes. If at all you want to come up with minor changes during design time, you can come, but not when we start. Okay, design when we start coding. After we starting the coding, you are not supposed to make any changes to our requirement. So like that, you can clearly convince the client. Maintain cumulative impact of changes and make it visible to the client. Okay, say for example, client will come and give one requirement change, so you feel it is easy and okay, so and you will incorporate the change. But what you have to do, you have to calculate what is the impact of that change on the budget and the schedule. Okay, you document it. Now once again you will come with one more requirement, so it is having some okay, moderate impact on the overall project. So you calculate what is the cost impact and what is the schedule impact, so you convince that to the client. Okay, if it is okay, then only I will implement the change. Okay, you should accept to give more time to implement, and you should pay more money to implement that. If that is okay, yes, then that risk can be taken. Negotiate payment on actual effort. Okay, that is very very important. Okay, so always you should negotiate payment on actual effort, that the actual effort put on the project. So we'll end up here, students, today. We'll continue tomorrow. Students, answer for the attendance, USN 1,
Yes, sir.
2,